Hi, welcome again to the I2I Motorcycle Academy YouTube channel. Also have a website at www.i2imca.com, and we're also on Facebook. What I was thinking about doing on this video was just quickly looking at diagnosing problems that people have in cornering. Now there's a few different areas cornering issues can develop from. Some are obvious and easy to fix. Some are not as obvious, but ironically, just as easy to fix. But there's a few areas to it. Have my cup of tea here, so things are all going well here at the I2I Motorcycle Academy office. Okay, I see cornering issues as having three main fundamental areas of which can cause different riders problems. So one of the basic ones is that where's my little bike gone? Oh yeah. Okay. One of the basic ones is that for bikes to go around, this is my little bike. I should probably get a small little Triumph bike, I'd say. It'll be more appropriate for this video. But I'll eventually use big bike to demonstrate anyways. But anyways, basically, what I'm trying to say is, for a bike to go around a corner, what we have to do is not actually turn the wheel and then steer it around. What we actually have to do is lean the bike over. Okay, so from a mechanical point of view, cornering is really just about leaning the bike over and getting it to go around the corner. Without being able to do that confidently, you're going to have problems. Interestingly enough, though, some riders are well able to lean the bike over. They can do it, but if you ask them, how are you doing that? Physically, what are you doing to get the bike to lean over? That's where problems can arrive pretty quickly. And there's so much misinformation out there, which people unfortunately believe, understandably. It means that they're left with a situation where they actually find it difficult to articulate what problem they're actually having, because there's so many ideas in their head, they're not sure which one is accurate. So steering the bike, mechanically getting the bike to lean over, there's so many ideas out there, like you just look the way you want to go, which on Machine Control 1 we deal with that straight away. We help people understand why people say that, why it's recommended to us, and even more commonly why it helps, reinforcing this idea that, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense why somebody would say that. The fact that it isn't true is besides the point, but it can help. People thinking, oh, if I just look over that direction, the bike will go that way. But that's not a mechanical input on a bike. That is not mechanically how you get any vehicle to turn left or right. So it's particularly true with bikes. You need to do more. Some people talk about using weight, so weighting the pegs and stuff. Again, not a very helpful thing to be doing at all, because it just doesn't really work. It can make the bike twitch, but it won't successfully make it actually go around a bend. And other ways are making steering inputs, so making an input on the handlebars. So these things here, making an input on those handlebars to make the bike lean over, because once it leans over, it'll go round. And so that's a steering input, which is fair enough, often referred to as counter steering, which is fine. And then another area is weight shifting. It's where we move our body to one side of the bike or the other. And so, first of all, the two mechanical ways that actually work. So, no matter what somebody says to you about all the different ways you can make a bike lean over to ground a bend, the two mechanical ways that has a plausible physical input that is backed up by the physics of how the machine works in terms of the dynamics and the balance and all the rest of it, is yes, definitely making inputs on the handlebars can cause the bike to lean in one direction or the other, which would successfully get it to go around a bend. And moving the weight, fully moving the rider's weight one side or the other. So those two methods are the only two provable, consistent way of making the bike lean over. Well, the beauty about that is because we only have two methods that actually work, it takes no time at all. You can figure out very, very quickly which one of these methods are actually more efficient. And in more times than I care to remember, we have proven on Machine Control 1 which one of these works really well. And it's usually the steering one, which is great. Which then, that narrows down. Because if you think about somebody who goes, I'm just not sure about how I get this bike around these bends. For that type of person, that would be brilliant. Because you go, okay, great. So you're going to show me these two ways that work. And as well as that, you're going to show me why one of them is better and how to use that. You go, oh, lovely. Finally, somebody can tell me what it is I need to be doing precisely on the machine to make it lean over. And so that could solve somebody's problem, period. But you could have somebody else then that knows all about counter steering and knows that's the method that you use to get the bike over. And from their perspective, they honestly believe they're using it to get the bike to go over. Little things that can cause a bit of an issue for them is they understand that they're definitely making an input on the handlebars, and that's called counter steering. But what they're not 100% clear of is whilst I'm making an input on this handlebar in one direction, that I need to be making the opposite on the other. So if I was pushing the right handlebar forward, well, it would be really helpful if I was making the left handlebar come back towards me, so like a dual-handed input. So even if you have somebody who knows how counter steering works, fine-tuning how they actually deliver that input and that it's a dual-handed input and one's pushing, one's pulling, can really help them be clear on what it is they're doing. So what's nice is they can feel like, okay, I kind of knew that's what I was doing. But at the same time, we're adding more layers of complexity, which makes them feel like, okay, I definitely knew I was doing something on the handlebars, but I wasn't 100% sure on precisely what it was I was doing. Another little nugget of information, still staying with counter steering, is depending on the position that the rider's on the bike. So wherever they happen to be sitting, so they might be leaning forward or they might be sitting upright, wherever they happen to be positioned on the bike. Their position that they sit on the bike whilst riding will normally dictate the angle at which they apply the pressure to the handlebar. So it's so common to have somebody making a good input on the handlebar, but unfortunately in a direction that's not the most efficient. So in other words, they're applying a push input to the handlebar, okay, but unfortunately, because of the direction they're applying it, it's not efficient. So what they needed to be doing was applying the pressure more forward and up. That would have been a way more efficient input than forward and down. That makes sense? And what that could do is that could change the bike from feeling slow and heavy to turn. In other words, the bike would kind of feel like it was fighting them around bends, versus making an efficient input in the right direction would make the bike feel really light and flickable. So when you think about that, imagine you could take a bike that somebody has described feels like, it's really slow and heavy to turn. It's because it's a big bike. And if in a half an hour of just going through some of this stuff, you can make that rider feel like, hold on a minute, this bike is really nice and easy. It's flickable. It's really easy to ride. It's not that heavy at all. It's a small change, but that can make a massive difference to generally how they ride from that point on. And it can be that simple. It's a fine cup of tea. That's another area that can affect somebody's cornering. Another one, a real sneaky one, where you have somebody who's fully aware of the steering side of things, pretty happy, and they understand that they have to lean this bike to get it to go around the bend. They're relatively happy with the amount of grip, because some people can be feeling like, I know that if I lean it over, but I'm worried about the grip levels. That can be another version of a person worrying about grip. So they're worried about the corner, but the essence of their fear is based on understanding what's going on with the grip levels. But let's just say for this example, they're not worried about grip. So they're happy to lean it over, they're happy about how they're leaning it over, and they're happy with grip. And that person could easily be lured into a false insecurity where they're pretty confident on that bike. They're happy with it. No problem at all. That could make them ride quickly. And then they come into a bend and it totally scares them. They run wide. They don't get the bike over to where they want it to be. It all goes wrong. And that can cause them then to start re-evaluating whether or not they're as good on this bike as they thought they were. Which is a shame, because it's such a simple thing causing them a problem. But with that particular type of person, it wouldn't be, uncommon for them to come to me and say, yeah, MC1 looks okay, but MC2, which is all about cornering, and maybe MC3, them are the ones I really want to do. Because in their minds, they might feel that the only barrier they're having is that they felt on the odd occasion they weren't able to get this bike over far enough to get it round that particular bend that they ran wide on. The unfortunate thing about that is, whilst most of the thinking seems logical, it's so common that I find that it wasn't actually their ability to develop lean that was causing them the problem. It was actually the sensation of creating the lean. And let me just explain that in a bit more detail. Let's say you have a rider heading down a road and there's 3 bends coming up. There's a bend in that direction, followed by a bend in this direction, followed by a bend in that direction. Not an unusual scenario that you'd find out on the road. Now, depending on the speed they're doing, so if they're going nice and steady through these bends, well, they won't need to lean that far to get the bike round the first one. But they'll have a bit of work to do, because they've got to get the bike back upright and over to the other side to get round the second bend. And that's essentially how quick they can move the bike from one side to the other will inevitably dictate the speed at which they can get through those bends before they would feel like they're hitting a limit that's making them feel like they're running wide. They're just not getting that bike leaned over far enough to match the rate of the corner based on the speed they're doing. And that person can often come away from that scenario feeling like their problem is fear of generating a steep enough lean angle. But what is interesting is how many times the actual lean angle is not their problem. So in other words, if I ask them to lean that bike over further and further and further and further, they could. And so on the face of it, it looks like, well, why would that rider be struggling to get around any bend? If they can lean this bike way over and they don't have a problem with that, why would they ever be running wide on a bend? But this is why. Whilst they might be well able and confident to lean the bike over a long way, they might not have realised that their body, as their body is feeling this bike leaning over, their body might be thinking, ooh, I don't like this. I don't like this idea of leaning this bike over. Because remember that your body isn't designed to do this. Your body is designed to stay upright. So when you have the rider on this bike and you're leaning over, it's not uncommon for the rider, for the body of the rider to go, ooh, I don't like this. This kind of feels like falling over. And your body has a natural resistance to lean. So what will happen is we will be able to lean the bike over, but there will be a certain amount of caution, anxiety attached to that. And what that can develop over time is it can develop a little bit of a limit as to how fast you can lean the bike over. Okay, so you might be able to lean it over a long way, but if you can't get it there quickly, unfortunately, all that big lean is not going to be available to you because you won't have the time to get it that far. And so in that scenario, particularly, we focus our efforts on understanding and training ourselves to develop lean faster. So what we're now talking about is lean rate rather than lean angle. So we're not that interested in how far over the bike actually goes. What we're interested in is how quick can we get the bike to go there. And that is a combination of understanding how to steer, having confidence and grip, and being able to convince the body that leaning over faster is not a bad thing. Now just imagine the impact of that. Imagine a rider who can lean this bike fast from one side to the other. That would allow them to get to a series of bends without losing as much speed compared to a rider who can lean over just as far, but it takes them a little bit longer to get there because there's an inbuilt fear of generating lean. And that is the sensation of lean particularly. So developing an understanding of how somebody corners and then how you get them to the next level could even be that most of the content that we would cover on Machine Control 1 and 2, they're kind of familiar with to a degree. But then there's one small element of the whole scenario that hasn't really occurred to them. And that could be the one vice-like restraint that's stopping them actually develop that finesse and flow. And so, once again, what I would say is you don't fix that type of thing by just going straight into MC2 or straight into MC3. It's important to go MC1, MC2, MC3, because we can go through each part of the technique, each part of the sensation of developing that lean, so that the rider can come out the end of it realizing which particular part of the whole scenario was the area at which that they were finding resistance. And again, so that's confidence in knowing how it works, confidence in understanding how it feels, and that awareness and repetition by doing it again and again and again, that we can make this happen when we need it, which I have always found makes a huge difference. If you have somebody who's not particularly that confident at leaning the bike over to massive lean angles, but are very confident at leaning it quickly, they don't lean that far, but they lean quickly. The person who leans quickly will normally be a more efficient, more fluent rider, even though they might not be using as much lean as would be available. But sure, if it's not needed, it doesn't really make any difference. So that's just a quick overview of how some riders might feel their general confidence in cornering is pretty good, but they've hit a bit of a barrier. It's not always obvious as to which part of the cornering technique requires help. And we have to go through it in a certain way to diagnose what the issue is. But again, like I said, the way the courses are developed, Machine Control 1, 2, 3, they're developed in a way that at each point we expose you to a new area within the area of cornering, which helps you understand, oh yeah, I thought this was just about steering, or I thought this was just about grip, or I thought this was just about developing massive lean. It might be also about that, but there's other things as well which could have a much more overwhelming impact on your efficiency at using the skills. So that's a little bit of information about cornering technique and how we figure out what's the best course of action to get you to the next level. So I hope that helps. And once again, I'll be doing more videos to try and give you an idea of why it's a good thing just to go through the courses 1, 2, and 3, because it'll build that awareness and a good foundation, helping you understand how to move to the next level. Thanks for watching. Catch you on the next one. Take it easy. Bye.